The shop was alive with noise, the kind that clung to the walls and rattled inside your chest. Gunfire cracked in sharp bursts from the range out back, each report followed by cheers or jeers, depending on who was holding the trigger. The air smelled of oil and powder, that metallic tang of brass mixed with the faint sweetness of energy drinks cracked open hours ago. Clerks leaned over glass counters like kings of their little domains, trading jokes with regulars who puffed out their chests and spoke in voices just a shade louder than necessary. It wasn't just a store, it was a stage for bravado. A cluster of men crowded the handgun display, trading boasts about their aim as if it were currency. One bragged about shooting blindfolded, another swore he could outshoot any Navy vet. Their laughter bounced around the walls, sharp and competitive, their words designed less to impress and more to undercut the man next to them. Two women stood nearby, ponytails tight, manicures immaculate, mimicking the swagger. One waved a compact pistol like it was a new designer clutch, flipping her wrist with exaggerated grace. Her friend laughed loudly at every joke, desperate to keep up with the rhythm of the room. The door swung open, and in walked someone who did not fit the script. A woman, plain and unremarkable at first glance. Her windbreaker was faded, the green long since muted into something closer to gray. Her jeans sagged at the knees, her sneakers wore holes at the edges, and the canvas backpack slung over her shoulder looked like it had survived 100 bus rides too many. She slipped inside quietly, her presence swallowed by the noise, until the crowd's instinctive radar picked her out. It didn't take long. Heads turned, smirks blossomed. One of the clerks, a wiry man with a sharp goatee and a smirk he wore like armor, leaned across the counter. "Coffee shops across the street, sweetheart," he drawled, his voice cutting through the chatter just enough to gather attention. The men around him chuckled, glad for a new target. A guy in a backward baseball cap, arms folded across his chest as if he owned the whole place, let out a whistle. "Thought this was a thrift store," he sneered. Canvas bag, worn shoes, clueless face, yeah, she's definitely lost. Laughter erupted, rolling through the shop like gunfire. Phones came out, cameras flipped to record. One woman raised hers with a grin, angling to capture the outsider like she was snapping a photo of a zoo animal. "This'll look great on my story," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Lost shopper at the gun store." The crowd chuckled on cue. The stranger didn't respond. She didn't flush or fumble or shrink. She simply walked forward, her brown hair brushing her shoulders, her sneakers whispering against the polished floor. Her silence didn't soften the ridicule. If anything, it sharpened it. The louder she ignored them, the louder they tried to break her composure. "Wrong place, yoga girl," someone barked from the back. "This store sells heavy metal, not kale smoothies." The laughter turned into a wave, claps and whistles punctuating the jeers. The outsider became the entertainment, the living punchline. Even the clerks who should have cared about professionalism leaned into it, tapping pens against the glass and making mock sales pitches. For a room built on bravado, it was easy sport until the woman's steady eyes began to move across the rifles behind the glass. But in that first moment, before anyone understood who she was or what she carried, she was just the joke of the room, and everyone was eager to laugh. She didn't rise to their bait. The laughter that circled her like smoke might as well have been silence. Each insult tossed her way landed flat, unacknowledged, as if she'd walked through fire before and knew this heat couldn't burn her. Her eyes moved slowly over the displays, passing pistols, skipping shotguns, settling instead on the rifle case with a focus that made the noise in the room falter for a second. She stepped closer, her hands brushing against the strap of her canvas backpack, her posture steady, deliberate, like she had all the time in the world. The wiry clerk with the goatee leaned forward on his elbows, smirk widening. "Let me guess," he said, loud enough to stir the crowd back into motion. "Something small and shiny? Maybe a pink grip to match your yoga mat?" The men around him chuckled, nodding along, glad for another opening. She tapped lightly against the glass, her fingernail making a sound too soft to cut the chatter, but sharp enough to change its pitch. "Show me the MRA Ghost Edition," she said, her voice calm, steady, almost quiet. "The unreleased version." The words hit the air like a gunshot without the smoke. For a moment, nobody moved. Then laughter, louder, harsher than before. The guy in the backward cap slapped the counter, wheezing. "Ghost Edition? Lady, that thing doesn't even exist outside the brochures." "What, you read about it on Reddit?" Another regular, a thick-set man in a sleeveless vest covered with flame tattoos, blocked her path to the counter. "You even know what that weighs?" he sneered. "Bet it'd snap your wrists before you got it out the door." His buddies roared at the line, clapping him on the back like he'd just landed the best punch of the night. She didn't blink. Her brown eyes held his for a beat, calm enough to be unnerving, then shifted past him as if he were already irrelevant. She didn't explain, didn't defend. Her silence stretched until it pressed against the edges of the room, making even the laughter feel forced. "Careful, fellas," another clerk said, mock concern dripping from his voice. "She might want to take a selfie with the 50 cal. That'll really impress her Instagram followers." Phones rose again. Flashes flickered. The mockery swelled like a storm, but it couldn't quite shake the strange steadiness she carried. Her hands never trembled. She didn't fidget. She just waited. Finally, the manager, a heavy-set man with a buzz cut, came out from the back, irritated by the noise. He squinted at her, then at the crowd. "All right, enough jokes. You want to see something that doesn't exist on the floor? Prove you're serious. Out back, range is open." The room stirred with excitement, voices overlapping as they moved toward the doors. "This'll be good. She's gonna choke. Bet she can't even load it." The backward cap guy laughed so hard he nearly dropped his energy drink. The women trailed behind, phones ready, faces lit with the thrill of watching someone walk into humiliation. She followed without hurry, her canvas backpack snug on her shoulders, her sneakers whispering across the floor. The crowd surged ahead, eager for blood, but she walked like the outcome was already decided. Every step she took toward the range shifted the air tighter, the mockery building, anticipation sharpening. They didn't see her as a threat. They saw her as a spectacle. And that was their mistake. The range stretched wide and flat under the late afternoon sun, the smell of dust and cordite sharp in the air. Targets lined the dirt field in neat rows, paper silhouettes peppered with holes, cans dented and shredded, a few steel plates ringing faintly from earlier shots. But it was the coin, small, silver, impossibly thin, dangling from a string at the far end of the lane that held everyone's attention. It swung lightly in the breeze, catching flashes of sunlight as if mocking anyone foolish enough to try. The crowd fanned out behind the firing line, their voices rising, laughter rolling like thunder. The man in the backward cap cupped his hands around his mouth. "Hit that, and I'll mop this place with my tongue," he shouted, setting off another wave of snickers. A woman in designer sunglasses chimed in, her phone already recording. "Better make it quick before you trip over that rifle. It's bigger than you are." The insults stacked higher, each one tossed out like ammunition, each speaker waiting for the shot that would prove them right. To them, failure was inevitable. That coin had never been touched, not in all the years they'd hung it as a dare. It was a decoration of arrogance, proof that no one could best it. She stepped forward without hesitation, the rifle resting in her hands as naturally as if it had grown there. The plain windbreaker, the peeling sneakers, the faded backpack, none of it matched the way she moved now. Her stride was measured, her body balanced, every step deliberate. She didn't fidget or falter, didn't let her eyes dart nervously like so many others before her. Instead, she laid the rifle on the rest, her fingers moving with quiet precision, checking, adjusting, securing. The laughter didn't stop, but it grew thinner, strained at the edges. Some of the men leaned forward, eyes narrowing despite themselves, unsettled by how steady she looked. The mercenary in the corner folded his arms, his jaw tight, but he said nothing. She lowered her cheek to the stock, one eye settling behind the scope. The world around her blurred. The noise of the crowd, the smell of powder, the distant clang of steel, all of it faded until there was only the coin. It swayed lazily on its string, glinting, daring, taunting. Her breath slowed, her shoulders relaxed. For 2 full seconds, she was still as stone. The shot cracked through the air, a clean, sharp sound that silenced every voice in an instant. The coin spun wildly, then split apart, each half twisting downward into the dirt. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The dust seemed to hang in the air, the echo of the rifle shot still vibrating against the walls of the range. Then the silence deepened, heavy, crushing. Every laugh froze on lips. Every smirk died mid-curve. The backward cap guy lowered his energy drink without realizing it, his mouth open, his face drained of color. The woman with the phone slowly lowered it, her hand trembling as if she no longer wanted proof of what she'd just witnessed. No cheer erupted, no applause, just that hollow, ringing quiet that comes when a room realizes its certainty has been shattered. The bravado evaporated, replaced by disbelief, by the weight of a single, undeniable truth. She had done what none of them could. She rose from the rifle with the same calm she had walked in with, her expression unchanged, her silence speaking louder than any boast. Behind her, the crowd stood still, as if the ground itself had shifted under their feet. And in that moment, the range was no longer theirs. It was hers. The pieces of the coin still lay in the dirt, glinting faintly in the dust, as if to remind everyone that what they'd just witnessed was no illusion. She didn't need to point to it. She didn't need to speak. The proof was already there, undeniable and heavy, echoing louder than the gunshot itself. The backward cap guy's laugh had long since died, his mouth slack, his hands empty. He bent slowly, almost unconsciously, setting his energy drink on the ground as though it had become too heavy to hold. The woman with the designer sunglasses slipped her phone back into her purse, but the recording light still blinked. She'd caught every second, every taunt, every sneer leading up to the shot. And though she didn't know it yet, the world outside that range would soon see it too. The clerks, who had leaned over counters with easy smirks and cheap lines, now avoided her gaze. Their pens no longer tapped. Their voices no longer rose above the hum. They stood stiff, glancing at one another as though searching for permission to breathe. The bravado that had filled the air like smoke only minutes before had vanished, leaving something thinner, sharper, almost brittle. She rose from the rifle with unhurried grace, sliding it back onto the counter with the same care she'd shown in lifting it. Her backpack settled onto her shoulder, faded fabric groaning under the weight of its unknown contents. She didn't pause to savor the silence. She didn't smile, didn't smirk, didn't claim victory. She simply existed in the stillness she had created, and that was enough to make everyone else feel smaller. The man in the leather vest who had tried to block her earlier shifted uneasily, tugging at the edge of his sleeve as though to hide the tattoos he had flaunted. The women who had laughed the loudest suddenly busied themselves with their phones, scrolling with fake intent, desperate not to meet her eyes. Their own voices replayed in their heads, each insult echoing back like a cruel joke they'd told against themselves. By nightfall, the video was already online. The backward cap guy had posted it, hoping to ride the wave of ridicule, expecting the comments to join in the laughter. But instead, the tide turned. Comment after comment tore him apart, each one calling out the arrogance, the mockery, the blindness of a crowd that couldn't see past worn sneakers and a canvas bag. The likes stacked high, not for him, but for her. She didn't even have a name, yet the internet had already given her one, the ghost, at the gun store. The next morning, the shop felt different. The noise never came back. The men still leaned over the counters, still handled weapons with rehearsed swagger, but something was missing. Their laughter rang hollow, their boasts shorter, their voices softer. Whispers replaced the jeers, whispers about who she might have been, about the scar on her knuckles, about the way she had held the rifle like it was an extension of herself. She hadn't left a name, hadn't left a trace beyond that impossible shot. She didn't need to. Her silence was the mark she carried with her, the weight that stayed behind after she slipped out the door. She didn't gloat. She didn't explain. She just walked away, her sneakers brushing the gravel outside, the sound almost too soft to catch. And yet, it was that silence, the absence of noise, the void where mockery once lived that lingered longest. It was louder than their laughter, sharper than their taunts, heavier than their bravado. It stayed in the shop, in their minds, in every whispered rumor that spread afterward. Her silence was the reckoning. Her silence was the final word.